Hey everyone, welcome to thelines.com. My name's Nicole, and in today's video, we are back talking about Formula One. We are going to take a look at what happened in the Bahrain GP, the first race of the season, and how what we learned from that race is going to impact our betting decisions heading into the second race of the season, the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. But before we dive into all of that, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below, give us a thumbs up, and ring the bell so you know every time we post a new video. Formula One fans couldn't have asked for a better first race of the season. We had everything. A battle for first, Ferrari taking P1 on the podium. We had engine failures, a fire, a safety car. There was so much to take in, but man, oh man, was it one to remember. So Ferrari took P1 for the first time in 45 races. Charles Leclerc won the Bahrain GP with his teammate Carlos Sainz coming in second place. So let's go ahead and just start with Ferrari. Now, consistency was key for this team. We knew in testing, both in Barcelona and in the Bahrain testing sessions, this team looked fast and it seemed to be getting their porpoising under control. But of course, as we said before, we weren't really sure how that was going to translate into race day, and there were no problems for this team. But what I'm most excited about is that Leclerc showed grit. For many people, they thought that Verstappen was the only truly aggressive driver on that racetrack, but Leclerc showed that he was willing to fight for that P1 spot. Verstappen challenged him multiple times, a little bit past the midway point of the race. Leclerc battled it out with him turn after turn, eventually won that battle and was able to pretty much coast from there to that victory. Once Gasly's car caught on fire late in the race and the safety car came out, Leclerc was able to get a cheap pit stop, and the rest was history, securing Ferrari's first victory in 45 races. Now, his teammate Carlos Sainz put up that P2 victory, and he did say that although he had a really great outcome securing that P2, he felt that it wasn't his best race. It was one of actually his most difficult races as a Ferrari driver, and felt that the car just didn't have the same speed as he had in qualifying. So he's really going to be able, Sainz is really going to be working with the team this week to try to improve the speed on race day. After Bahrain, Charles Leclerc is now the favorite to win the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. He has moved from plus 800 to plus 185 to win the championship as well. He is now just behind Max Verstappen in the Drivers' Championship odds. Speaking of Max Verstappen, we've got to talk about what we saw from Red Bull in that race. Red Bull were the betting favorites heading into the Bahrain GP. Max Verstappen secured the fastest lap in Bahrain testing, but he could not overcome his car's mechanical issues, and the issues didn't just stop with him. So Leclerc ended up winning the battle over Verstappen for first. We talked about that just a few seconds ago. But late in the race, things were on track for a second place finish for Verstappen and a fourth place finish for Perez. We only had a few laps to go in the race, and that's when we started getting the mechanical issues from both of these cars. Verstappen started to lose power steering. He was talking to his engineers over the radio. Unfortunately, it was not something that they could control on their end, so they asked Max to kind of just grind it out until the end of the race. Unfortunately, the car could not make it that far, and he had to retire early. And then in turn one of the final lap, the exact same issue that plagued Verstappen ended up happening to Sergio Perez, his teammate, and he spun out after engine failure on turn one of the final lap. Now, Christian Horner came out and said that this is a fuel system issue that both Verstappen and Perez were dealing with. Now the FIA and Red Bull is coming out and saying it might be a different issue. But we will not know whether or not Red Bull has really gotten a handle on these mechanical issues until the next race. Verstappen is now sitting behind Leclerc in the odds for the Saudi Arabian GP, but he is still the favorite to win the championship. Now, if it is a fuel system issue, it is likely going to be something that can be fixed for this next race. From watching the Bahrain GP, Verstappen and Perez look good. These cars look good. So if they can get those mechanical issues solved, I don't think it's going to be a huge issue for them going forward. Now, because they didn't put up any points in that first race of the season, they do have a hill to climb when it comes to the Constructors' Championship and the Drivers' Championship, but keep in mind that the cars and the drivers look good for 99.99% of the race. So when you're looking at these individual race odds, don't let those early retirements freak you out too much. I do think Red Bull is going to be able to get a handle on these issues. Now, talking about race results, we have got to go to Mercedes next. When you are wagering on the Saudi Arabian GP, just make sure that you do your research, because if you are going to look at finishing positions and finishing positions alone, you are going to be heavily misled, because you're going to see that Mercedes got a P3 and a P4 finish, and their car must not have been as slow or had as many issues as they said during testing. And that is really not the case. There was a lot of luck on Mercedes' side in that race. The car does not look fantastic right now. Hamilton and Russell continue to deal with porpoising. You can see this the most as they are slowing down into the turns. The car is still having a lot of bounce. They have not been able to get that porpoising under control like some of the other teams have had heading into that first race of the season. Now, we knew this was going to be an issue for Mercedes based on what we saw for testing, and they just haven't seemed to be able to get a handle on it. Now, I'm not saying that Mercedes is a back of the pack car. They were definitely in that top 6 for the first race of the season, and they grinded it out and put themselves into positions where they were able to capitalize on the early retirement of Red Bull. As soon as those Red Bull cars were out, Mercedes and George Russell had enough to get themselves into the P3 and P4 position. So it's not that Mercedes' car is horrible, but from what I'm seeing, this is not a race winning car at the moment. And again, if Red Bull didn't have to do those early retirements, Mercedes would have not gotten those P3 and P4 finishes. So just make sure that you're really reading up on everything that's happening on the race. Don't just take a look at those final finishing positions to make your betting decisions for next race. All right, this one kills me because McLaren is one of my favorite teams. You guys know that I love Daniel Ricciardo, but the cars just do not look good. We knew that Ricciardo had missed testing because of a positive COVID-19 test, and Lando Norris missed a lot of testing, not because of COVID, but because the car had overheating and braking issues, and they had to pull it off of the track for Bahrain testing. But what we saw during the actual race was honestly something that we would have expected from Haas in the 2021 season. The car looked slow. The drivers were frustrated. They were getting lapped in the race. Norris and Ricciardo finished in P14 and P15, and there are just no signs of them really improving that by next weekend. And that is indicative that is shown in those drivers' championship odds. Both of their odds have plummeted so far. All right, so we have talked about the Bahrain GP. Now we have to take a look at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix and figure out which bet we like best. And I am going to focus on Mercedes. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Nicole, you just got done for 2 minutes telling us that Mercedes is still dealing with porpoising issues and they are not a race-winning car. And I stand by that. I do not think Mercedes is going to win the Saudi Arabian GP, but here is why I am wagering on both drivers to finish in the top 6. You have one of the best drivers in the world, Lewis Hamilton, behind the wheel of this Mercedes car, and George Russell is also a very, very strong driver. They both now know how to control this car in race day situations now that they have the Bahrain GP under their belts, and their engineers have one additional week to try to get those porpoising issues under control. Lewis Hamilton's going to be very aware that the porpoising is affecting him the most going into the turns, but I think with his expertise, he's going to be able to counteract that. In the Bahrain GP, without the early retirements of Red Bull, they were still good enough to secure a P5 and P6 finish. That's what they were on track to finish with before Red Bull retired early. So no, this is not a race-winning car, but I do think that this is a top 6 car for both drivers. So if we head over to BetMGM Sportsbook and we scroll down all the way, almost all the way down to the bottom of the page, you will see here that for both drivers to finish in the top 6, the odds for Mercedes are at plus 110, and I like that value. I think that George Russell and Lewis Hamilton, even if they are dealing with the same amount of porpoising issues, can make it happen in the Saudi Arabian GP. So that is what I am taking this week. That about wraps it up for today's video. I will see you next time.